Oh, very good. I like the way that you just went quiet. Well done. Good evening and welcome. I'm Paul Barclay from ABC Radio National here in Brisbane. Great to be here. Before I proceed, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather for this event, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders both past and present. Well, welcome to the Judith Wright Centre of Contemporary Arts for tonight's discussion, Great Expectations, Megatrends and the Arts. Before we get going, some boring but essential housekeeping matters. In case of emergency, please proceed to the nearest safe exit, which is located to the right and left of the room, and follow the instructions of the Judith Wright Centre staff. Bathrooms, if you need to know, are located down the corridor to your left. And I should say that as an enthusiastic tweeter, I encourage you, if you're predisposed, to join the conversation online. Feel free to use the Twitter hashtag ArtsQLD, ARTSQLD. My handle is @PaulBarclay if you want to rope me into it as well. You'll also notice that we've left some cards and pens for you on each chair at the end of the night. Can you please just take a minute to write down your key takeaway message and either leave it on your seat or hand it to an usher on your way out. Tonight's event is brought to you by Arts Queensland's Arts Acumen Initiative. I'd like to welcome to the stage Arts Queensland's Deputy Director General, Kirsten Herring.
Paul, and I'll be quick. I'd also like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this event is taking place, elders both past and present. It's fantastic to see so many people turn out tonight, which I know will be an incredibly insightful presentation. I've seen Stefan present in a range of contexts before. First of all, for the work that he did for the Queensland Government on megatrends affecting the tourism industry, which was probably a couple of years ago now. I also, strangely enough, saw him at my son's school, talking to young boys about what the trends are that will be affecting their employment and where their lives will lead. And I thought, well, it's really interesting to try and apply some of those trends to the arts. You know, where will this take us, and what will be the opportunities for our arts sector? Where will our talented and creative and brilliant minds be employed in arts in the future? So that was the key idea about today. We badge this under Arts Acumen. For us at Arts Queensland, Arts Acumen is providing our artists and arts workers with the skills and knowledge and insights to have productive, creative careers. And this is just one of a series of seminars that we'll be rolling out over the course of this year or moving forward as we go. One other thing I'd like to say is Arts Queensland is certainly positioned in the Queensland Government's Advanced Queensland agenda. Many of you would have seen that the Premier is very committed to innovation and funding new ideas as we move forward, and Arts Queensland will certainly be part of that and will be developing what we're being told will be a 10-year roadmap for cultural and creative industries. So it's a real opportunity for arts to probably stand up at a really interesting time in development in the world, digital innovation, a new casino development, although I'm not allowed to call it that, it's an integrated resort development coming online in Brisbane that's going to create a lot of visitation. So it's a really interesting time to be part of the arts, and so I'm delighted you could all be here and to join us from Arts Queensland's perspective, and I hope you have an interesting night. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. I should say before I go any further, we do want to hear from you tonight as well, and we'll be taking questions from the floor at the end of Stefan's presentation. So bear that in mind when you're listening to what Stefan has to say. He'll be giving you some big picture thoughts, and really it's all about getting you thinking about how your industry, how your art sector or your creative endeavour will exist in this sort of scenario that Stefan will be painting. We are very pleased to welcome Dr. Stefan Hajkowicz. He's the Principal Scientist in Strategic Foresight at the CSIRO. I know Stefan, we've spoken at length for my radio program Big Ideas about global megatrends, so I know that you are in for a real treat tonight. Stefan has seen the future, and he's here to tell you all about it. And by and large, there is actually a lot to be excited about in the creative and knowledge industries, even if there's a few challenges along the way. I know this because I basically work in that knowledge sector myself. At ABCRN, I have seen and experienced massive change, and I'm one of those guys that goes back to the pre-digital era, and I really like the new era that we're working in. I like the new platforms that our content gets put out on. I like being able to interface with social media and many of the other new ways of getting what we do out to the world. So I'm convinced that there is a good future ahead. Stefan has devoted his career to helping governments, companies and communities recognise and understand patterns of change and big trends so that they can make wiser choices and secure better futures. He was recently appointed to the World Economic Forum's Global Strategic Foresight Community, a group of strategy and foresight heavyweights that share ideas about the future of the world. In his work as author of Global Megatrends and as a keen supporter and active participant in our rapidly growing knowledge and creative economy, tonight Stefan will provide you with an insight into the ever-changing social, economic and technological trends and their potential impact on Queensland's art and cultural sector. As I say, you're in for a treat. Please join me in welcoming Stefan to the stage. All the best.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I hope I can deliver. Oh no, it's gone dead on me. This is my time device. I have to stick exactly to 35 minutes, but it is fantastic to be here. This is where I had my first midlife crisis, and I did circus training with Circa, which was a lot of, it's instead of going to a gym, you can do tightrope and the tissue thing where you get wrapped up in that thing and then they have to untangle you so you can get back down again. And it all was very painful, but really good over the long term. So when I have my second midlife crisis, I'll come here again, or the other part of that is buying a Vespa instead of a car. That's my thing. So look, fantastic to have this opportunity to share with you this story of the future. I work at CSIRO, where I do lead a small and growing team that does strategic foresight, where we use methods to look 5 to 20 years out for Australian industry, society, right across a lot of different sectors, to flesh out patterns of change and ask what they mean. And that's what I want to share with you, really, the latest thinking that we have on megatrends that push us into a different space. What is a megatrend, and how do we kind of come up with that terminology and thinking? Well, it was really sort of 6 years ago that we started doing that. It was based on a book by a US academic called John Naisbitt, who's an economist. And he put forward this concept of gradual patterns of change that build slowly, but eventually express with explosive force and put you into a different space and make the world around you operate quite differently. And it's all about how quickly you read the signal. The analogy I sometimes give is the frog being brought to boil in water, but that's unethical, and we're from Queensland, so let's do a cane toad, and then it's all right. So initially it feels quite warm, the temperature goes up until it gets too hot, and then it starts to boil and it cannot escape, it gets boiled. But if it were thrown into already boiling water, the temperature shock gives it a chance to scamper out, and that's the mega trend, the shift that happened around the film company, Eastman Kodak, which did traditional print film, and then the world of digital happened, and then we had mobile phones that could take an image at very high quality and disseminate that on social media widely. Their business model was gone. They had to adapt in the 1990s, not the late late noughties, because by then the change had happened, and in 2012 they filed for bankruptcy. But let me jump into the story and start sharing with you some of our thinking on global megatrends. So this differs a little bit from my book, actually. Which is when I first met Paulie. We went to, what was the name of the bookshop? Avid Reader, absolutely awesome little bookshop where they crammed about 100 people in there, literally. And Paul had read my book, which was very nice. We had a great discussion, but it has moved on a little bit from there as we've done more thinking and analysis. So you'll see the picture change slightly. These are the megatrends, and we present them in a Venn diagram. I'll explain why soon. The first one we call more from less, and this is the world of scarce water, energy, mineral and food resources in light of growing demand for those, which is creating this efficiency crunch and a lot of innovation in terms of how we use that. So the world has more than 7 billion people on it now. It will asymptote or level off closer to 10 billion people midway through the century, and incomes will rise from about 14,000 GDP per capita US today of global income to 44,000 by the year 2060, according to the OECD long-range forecast. So we move into a wealthier world with more people that puts greater pressure on those underlying resources, and that's going to be a dominant theme for the decades ahead. Planetary pushback is the next one, where we look at the way we've changed world's Earth systems and how they operate, from climate change down to the microbial level, and antimicrobial drug resistance too, where we've changed the way the microbes have evolved, and we now have a big problem. The Silk Highway looks at the changing world economy as the rapid growth in India and China continues, and it's a mega trend, it's a heavy-set trajectory. We'll see some ups and downs on the graph, but it will continue for some time to come, and we're taking the weight off the sort of sheer magnitude of change onto the nature of structural change. The China economy is going to start working quite differently, and already is. Last year we saw the manufacturing part of the China economy surpassed by the services sector. And it's a different economy with big implications for the arts sector. Forever Young is about our ageing population and growing rates of chronic illness and diet and lifestyle-related illness that are pushing healthcare expenditure up to somewhat unsustainable levels. Digital immersion is where a lot of my thinking is focused these days, and that of my team, in that the digital economy is springing up on us incredibly quickly and mutating and moving at an exponential growth rate, not just a linear one, which is it's fulfilling the concept of a megatrend, a gradual but pretty soon big change. And I think the world beyond 2020 operates differently to the one we know today. Porous boundaries is the consequence of this digital technology revolution, where the administrative structures and the frameworks within which we operate, a lot of the boundaries we used to know disappear. For the workforce, they disappear. For information, even privacy is something we're probably going to have to give up because there's no other option as we move forward out into the future. Lastly, Great Expectations, which is the mega trend, which somewhat disagrees with the two ones before it, and it says that as this digital economy goes up around us and we become immersed in digital, the value of the real world gets more important, but also we have great expectations for that all-important experiential good, which is right front and centre to what arts is all about. Just quickly, why a Venn diagram? Well, we went to a holiday in New Zealand and we did bring these three mega trends on the car trip on the North Island together. So we have one called ice cream, one called children, and one called car trip. Now we can bring two of them together, children and ice cream, for example, and use serviettes, or responsible adults can do ice cream and car trip, taking normal care, and even children and car trip is manageable. Activity books and games. But as we bring the three mega trends together, human beings have not yet devised a strategy that works. And I got my favourite hat vomited in with ice cream flavour vomit, which isn't very good. But that's the concept of megatrends, in that these are different patterns and you're actually looking at how they intersect and combine. And that's where, inside that Queensland's arts sector, that's where some of the opportunities lie. Let's jump into the story. More from less, well, it's illustrated through food demand. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization forecasts an increase of 70% in total food production for the world to feed its growing population and increasing rates of per capita calorie consumption. Plus, we're seeing diet diversification right across Asia. As they increase wealth, their dinner table looks a lot more like ours. So it's not just rice, it's a lot of different things with higher energy requirements. We've seen in recent times some food price spikes as supply and demand come together, and we're likely to see some shifts in innovation of how we make food. So, a more radical but technically feasible shift is fully lab-grown meat. In 2013, a taste test was done in London where a hamburger was eaten by 3 food critics, but no cow was involved after the stem cells were extracted off it. It was grown in a Petri dish, and they quite liked it. One of them said it didn't taste quite right, the fat content was too low, but the researchers had taken that out in order to make it more healthy. The downside of that hamburger was it cost $450,000 to buy, which put it out of the reach of a lot of people. However, when Professor Post and his team did another analysis on it, and they actually came to Australia to present this research, and at the invitation of the Australian Cattlemen's Association, they presented this concept here, and they still got out alive, which I think, always bring the disruptor into the tent, bold on both sides. But they were asked to say, give us an estimate of how much it would cost to produce building economies of scale around this, and with current 2016 technology, which shows how quickly it moves, and his estimate is we could get it to $80 a kilogram. So some potentially radical shifts in how we make food. Energy fits into this more from less megatrend as well. The big disruptor that will change energy is storage, batteries. Batteries are getting cheaper. The graph there at top right of that, top left of that slide shows us a lot of different estimates of dollars per kilowatt hour out of a battery from 2010 out to 2030, and we can see all those estimates are seeing drops. We could see some breakthrough technologies that see more substantial drops, but this can change the way the electricity grid operates. As Deutsche Bank have said, we're approaching parity on conventional coal-fired electricity with the solar panels and the battery pack. The bottleneck for solar has for a long time not been the panels. CSIRO's invented printable solar panels which can go onto every surface of the building. There is work on solar-powered paint, the paint can cause the same photovoltaic reactions to go on and generate electricity. The block has been batteries and battery costs, but they're coming down. And the performance of batteries, we don't lose anything. So the Tesla Model PS90D goes from 0 to 100 in 2.9 seconds compared to a Ferrari at 3 seconds, and it's fully electric and could do that solar powered. So batteries are about to change the way the electricity grid operates and how we get electricity. Mining above the ground too is an interesting concept as we look to recycled waste streams more. So if you dug up a ton of mineral ore body, the dirt surrounding the gold back in the year 1800, you'd have got about 30 to 50 grams of gold. If you do it today, you get 1 to 5, about on average you get 3 grams of gold. But if you harvest a ton of computer circuits, you get 250 grams of gold. Now, it's much harder to extract the gold from the computer circuits, but we can do it. And that is a much richer waste stream, and its innovation lies at the core of solving some of those dilemmas under more from less. So that's the more from less mega trend. And again, I think art will be shaped and will shape some of these agendas, and that's why this big picture view is the one that I'm trying to take. Planetary pushback is the next one. So we know the story of climate change. Actual versus predicted are following each other pretty closely. That's just maximum temperature in Australia, on average across Australia from 1910 to 2010. It's a simple data set we can download, but we are on target for a 1 to 1.5 degree hotter Australia. February was the hottest year on record for 2015. 2015 was the hottest year on record. February 2016 was the hottest February on record. 2016 is set to be a hotter worldwide year. This map I'm showing you is the NASA satellite map of anomalous temperatures above long-term averages, and it's all glowing in red. So we are following this pattern towards a hotter world. Now, on average 1.5 degree hotter Australia, that's on average. That masks a huge amount of variability, which is what is the more scary aspect of climate change. They're the shocks and more extreme weather events, more high-powered cyclones, more bushfire conditions, and a challenging world. But engineering solutions are still there. The issue of biodiversity loss fits into this mega trend as well, as partly due to climate change and elevated sea temperatures associated with coral bleaching. We've lost roughly half the Great Barrier Reef compared to before Europeans were here. And it's shrinking at the rate of 0.5% per year, more rapidly in the southern parts than the northern parts, but we're losing a lot of it. And despite a lot of our efforts, we're not turning it around. So there's some iconic natural assets that are at risk here, and climate change combines with other forces to cause those. Now, antimicrobial drug resistance is good because it will make you stop worrying about climate change. Other than that, it isn't so good. So this is a challenge for the world. It has a couple of driving forces behind it. First is the drying up of the pipeline of the discovery of new antibiotics. For 30 years, the pharmaceutical companies have not put out a whole brand new class of antibiotics. The ones we're getting are variations and changes on existing antibiotics. And yeah, that's part of the problem. But the other part is excessive use of antibiotics in livestock production and generally out there in the community is associated with increasing rates of resistance. So year on year, we're finding more and more species of bacteria that we can't kill with any known antibiotic. And the mortality rate is going up. This shows here that deaths attributable to antimicrobial resistance could be greater than cancer by the year 2050, according to forecasts by the World Health Organization and the RAND Institute that did a review and a study into where antimicrobial resistance was likely to take the world. So I put this as one of the top challenges that we're facing. It's very much real. My brother's a doctor at the Royal Brisbane Hospital here. He's head of infectious diseases. They have lost patients, healthy individuals otherwise, who often have travelled somewhere and come back with an antimicrobial infection that they cannot cure with any of the antibiotics they got. So it's going to get worse and bigger, but again, at the same time, there is a huge amount of innovation in response to this. The scientific community is mobilising. Silk Highway is a story of how the Asian economies are changing and how the world economy changes. This map here is based on algorithms by a London academic called Danny Quah. And he has worked out how to show the hotspot of global GDP. So imagine that map of the world like a fry pan. And instead of emanating heat, all of those countries are emanating economic output, GDP. So where it's hottest is where the economic output concentrates. And in the year 1980, that point is in the Atlantic Ocean between the powerhouses at the time of the United States and Europe. By the year 2010, it's over Saudi Arabia, and by the year 2030, it is firmly between India and China, as these two massive economies have continued to grow at rates of 6 to 9% per annum. 2015 saw, in purchasing power parity terms, the China economy get bigger than the US economy, which broke the US economy's 140-year grip on being the world's biggest economy. I mean, GDP per capita in the US is still much higher, but in overall size and GDP, the China economy is greater. The world economy is getting dragged in a easterly and somewhat slightly southerly direction, but towards Australia's backyard, which is good in some ways, and it's happening quite quickly. There's Shenzhen, which was built at the rate of a skyscraper a day and a boulevard a week during the 1990s, and a whole new economy sprung up. Is an incredible rate of change, but that's a period of industrialization that happens so quickly. So if an economy goes through a phase of agricultural development, industrialization, then towards advanced service sector, I think we can start to see evidence of the Chinese economy crossing into this advanced service sector economy. So the red line there shows the percentage of the economy that's put into the services sector, and you can see it's crossed over from industry there, which is mostly manufacturing and mining. Now, that's likely to continue, but another graph I look at is steel intensity, grams of steel used to produce $1 of GDP. In the agricultural phase, we use very little steel. Industrialization, when they built Shenzhen that quickly, steel intensity goes right up in China, as in the US and German economies, steel intensity peaked and then it came back down again. As steel intensity peaks and comes back down again, we're switching into an advanced service sector economy because we've built the railway tracks once, we don't need to make them again. The economic activity switches to a bunch of office workers who work in healthcare or law or financial services, and the economic activity is starting to shift into the services space. Well, that's what's happening to China, and now like iron ore is trading at $40, $50 a tonne, not $180 a tonne. Coal prices are lower. The stuff the China economy wants, our biggest trading partner, is changing, and it's changing into a space that is more conceptual and about ideas. Forever Young is one about ageing population. This is 3 projections from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Actual versus forecast is following a pretty similar pathway here. 14% over 65 today and 25% by the year 2050. It's happening actually around the world, this shift to a more aged demographic. In Japan, they're going to be 40% over the age of 70 by 2050, which is an unworkable situation with not enough people in the workforce. So this shift to a more aged demographic is going on, and it has quite a few implications. I'm going to jump back to that slide in a second. Part of the implication of that is unsustainable growth in healthcare costs, which is right across the OECD. That's the data there for Australia, percent of GDP spent on healthcare going up, and the bulk of healthcare expenditure is public dollars going into it, and we can see that growing from it's 25% today, and it will be 40% by the year 2043 if we continue. We can kind of draw straight line projections through the Queensland budget and spend every dollar the public sector has got on health out at some point in the future, unless things are done. So there is a challenge to stop this unsustainable growth. Part of it is fueled by ageing population. The bulk of your healthcare expenditure happens in the last few years of your life. So as we have a lot more people in that position, we're spending more on healthcare. But it is also growing rates of obesity and diet-related illness that is happening and continuing to happen across the OECD. So the latest reports are showing that this phenomena is slowing down, but it has still got a lot of growth ahead of it before it really levels off. Australia roughly goes from 50% overweight or obese today to 70% by the year 2025. Now, that I do qualify this though in that BMI is a pretty bad estimate of it on its own, and a lot of these population studies are based on BMI, height to weight ratio, and if you just use that without thinking, a lot of professional footballers are clinically obese when in reality they're not. They're very fit individuals. BMI is a partial measure, but behind this though, other measures such as waist diameter and type 2 diabetes are all showing similar trends. So something's going on with diet-related illness and chronic illness in society that is fueling this growth in healthcare expenditure. And I think there are many, we're backing away from preventative health, even though the benefit-cost ratios of intervention are so good. Digital immersion is the next megatrend, and this is sort of what this explosion in digital technologies that we can all see and move so quickly all the time, what it's doing to us. And I think, I use a bit of an analogy to explain how this one plays out, because this is not a bunch of straight lines, this is growth. And I'm going to do some algebra on you. Your question is that we have a lily pond here, right? And it's another tragic situation for a frog, because frogs love to be able to jump in and out of the water and catch fish. I'm not sure if they catch fish actually, but they need to get in and out of the water. And the lily pads that are exotic from another country, they grow at an exponential rate. So we start with 1, then we get 2, then we get 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and it grows quite quickly. So we have, start with 1, the area of lily pad doubles every day according to that progression. It takes 19 days for the pond to be half covered. On what day will it get fully covered? 20, you guys smart. So on day 20, one day later, the pond gets fully covered. Now, for the first 14 days there, the frog's got no idea, happy as anything, jumping around, doing what he needs to do, and is a happy frog. Unfortunately, though, 14 to 18, something's going on. Every day, the frog looks at the lily pad and something's changed. It's not quite the same, and day by day, it's happening. It's not till we get to day 18 that the frog realizes something's going on and has to jump into a new pond and tries to respond. Now realistically, we want the response to happen, let's say here. We need to be able to try and diagnose that line. The reality, for a lot of industries and businesses, the line stays flat. For the Queensland arts sector, parts of it will be facing a curve like this as digital technology happens. If it's a crowded pond with lots of other frogs, they may jump first and miss out on the opportunity. The real data shows us something very similar to that exponential growth curve, though. It's not, the world beyond 2020 isn't roughly what we knew today. It's had this explosion. Device connectivity is one thing. Okay, so this concept of the Internet of Things that you may have heard of, plugging stuff into other stuff. Metcalfe developed a theory on this that was it's quite old, but it's still a good one. And his analogy was when you have one fax, it does nothing. 2 faxes is a simple network with hardly any functionality. A network of 45 million faxes, which is peak fax before they start to decline again, is able to transform the business environment, because the law firm in Jakarta can close a deal with the one in New York and sign a contract that was hitherto impossible, and that creates a new business ecosystem because there are changes in the way businesses can operate. Now, the internet is not just faxes getting plugged into faxes, it's everything getting plugged into everything with this concept of meta-level functionality, that we're going to create new functions we don't yet understand. So Philips have their personalised wireless lighting introduced last year, which the light bulbs have Ethernet connections via Wi-Fi, so that they can read the stock market, and if it's going bad, they go greeny, bluey kind of colours. If it's going well, they go bright orange. Washing machines have Ethernet connections so that you can control them on your iPhone and wash your socks from a meeting if you want. can't find your socks, but you can wash your socks remotely. That might be pointless on its own, but what if all the washing machines were talking to each other and synchronizing their wash cycles so that the electricity grid load could be reduced? And that's the concept of meta-level functionality across this incredible network. There's an explosion in data. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are created. 90% of the data is available today in the last 2 years. Exponential growth curves on data and computing speed, Moore's law. The number of transistors on an integrated circuit doubles at the same cost every 1.5 years, and there it is. And I had a chat to the lady at Intel who does my job and does strategic foresight for Intel Corporation, and she talks quite regularly to the engineers who make Moore's law happen, and she asks them how much longer they can keep doing it for. Because at some point, particle physics comes into play and we can't just keep making it smaller and smaller at the nanoscale. They say they've got a line of sight to keeping it going till 2025. Beyond that, possibly, but they can't guarantee it. It will stop at some point. And given it's an exponential growth curve, if they keep doing it from now to 2025, the iPhone and smartphone and the gadgets we have are going to be so much more powerful than they are today. That's you know, we're here, and then it goes up like this. So it's about to get very steep. But then we might have quantum computing. So D-Wave systems think they have made it. A couple of scientists writing in Nature say they probably haven't, but they think they have, and there's a bit of a debate going on. A quantum computer has a qubit. Instead of binary on-off switches, it's got qubits, which are unstable but can hold multiple positions at one time. And the whole thing is about making those qubits stable. If it does, it allows parallel processing to an extent that is vastly superior than what we know today, and makes your computer a whole lot smarter, which makes, there's probably a couple of slides to get to that point, but it makes robotics and artificial intelligence a whole lot better too. Already we're seeing that happen, and we're seeing the automated vehicle phenomena that in 2004 we were very, very far from coming close to getting a car to drive through the witches' hats on some of those early experiments. Today, a vehicle is far superior to you at driving itself. You know, the least reliable part of the car is a human driver, and we can automate that out. And a lot of it comes down to advanced artificial intelligence algorithms and the sensory systems and the powerful computers that they're able to operate are getting better and better. There is likely to be in near term a revolution around customer service with robotic devices talking to you. So when you have online chat with a company, you pretty soon are going to be often talking to a robot instead of a person at the other end of that chat tool, because they're starting to prove their effectiveness. In so many ways, artificial intelligence is moving faster and faster, and it's able to replace a lot of human jobs. You know, we did a study on the future of work, and a lot of research came out last year and the year before suggesting anywhere between 40 to 55% of all the jobs we do today will get done better by a robot or a computer within a 10 to 20 year time frame. I think that's not exactly right, because we're starting to see a shift in the labour market. You know, the example I give is there's stuff that robots aren't going to be able to do. And after 7 years of effort by scientists from UC Berkeley, who are smart scientists, to build this robot, they found they could only still fold a towel in 20 minutes. Because of the regular nature of a towel, it's unstructured once it's dropped on the floor. There's a lot of complexity, and this is the sort of shift that we've uncovered in labour markets. You know, what kind of jobs do we get in the future? Well, if you're a developer or a printer working in a laboratory making print film, you're part of a population of workers in Australia that has almost disappeared, because that is a highly structured, rules-based and repetitive job that is amenable to automation. But at the other end of the photographic industry is a field photographer who has to go outside and take photos of stuff. Now, they're enabled by digital technology. They're more productive because of all the powerful digital technology that surrounds them. But their job is about creativity, complexity. They need EQ as well as IQ to be a wedding photographer. A lot of it is about social intelligence to work out what's a good thing to photograph, or when you want it and when you're not. Robots and digital systems are very far from sorting this stuff out. So there is a clear cut between these two job categories in the photographic sector. The one with creativity, complexity, judgment, beauty, art is part of that. That's the one that's grown, and the other one has shrunk. So do we have a STEM crisis or a STEAM crisis in Australia? I think that's a good question to start to argue. I think combining the technical capabilities with arts and creativity, that might be the best solution for your kids to get a good job in the future. Technical capabilities on their own may not work. Porous boundaries. The way marketplaces will operate is changing. Ronald Coase won his Nobel Prize for coming up with the theory of the firm about why we got all this labour and brought it together into one structure, and that became the most efficient way of organising labour. But the peer-to-peer economy is challenging that theory. Right, the peer-to-peer economy takes away the transaction costs and the asymmetries of information which created firms. So I used AliExpress recently to buy 2 electric scooters, which can go 27 kilometres an hour for, in theory, 40 kilometres, but closer to 30 kilometres. The Chinese company that made them had a lot of complex Chinese writing on its website. There was no way I could trust it or understand it. I didn't have to trust them, though. I had to trust the platform that sat between me and them. And there was also a lot of rating and approvals information from enough people for me to be able to judge a picture. AliExpress, once you hit purchase, it starts counting backwards from 20 days, and if I haven't clicked I've got it, I get a refund and it goes into dispute resolution because they're trying to win the trust war. And we've seen so many other of these platform economics models, the peer-to-peer models, work quite effectively because of they're able to take away those transaction costs, and they can provide me as a consumer with information that wasn't previously there. It's also opening up a playing field. So one of the disruptors before CSIRO is these crowdsourced data platforms where data problems are solved. NASA had this issue where it wanted to predict solar flares on the sun because a solar flare emits a massive electromagnetic radiation which can interfere with space communications. And knowing the next one is important because you can correct for it. It's been an unsolved problem for quite some time, so they tried putting it out onto a platform called Innocentive, which is a bit like Kaggle. This is where if I've got a whole bunch of data and I want it solved, I upload it. And this guy, Bruce Craigan, who doesn't have a PhD in astrophysics and didn't go to the previous conference, he's an amateur radio operator from New Hampshire, jumps on and he has an idea about how to solve it. And he loads up his model, which NASA ran on the real data, and find that it is 8 hours in advance, 85% accurate, and 75% accurate in 24 hours in advance, which is a huge step. Now, this is a complex, thorny science problem that they were able to get via a complete left-of-field solution, and it's fantastic. He got $30,000 for this. Now, CSIRO would have put a couple extra zeros on the end. We'd have also had to say, may not find the answer, and I think this is the beauty of the peer-to-peer world that we're moving into, is that it is opening up expertise. A study done on Innocentive also, out of 166 competitions on it and 12,000 scientists, found that having expertise unrelated to the problem that you're solving increased, not decreased, but increased your chance of successfully solving it. So we find biologists getting into finance, for example, and solving a problem that the finance experts couldn't solve, and vice versa. So let's go to the last megatrend, great expectations. There's a downside to this information world and digital world that we're moving into. We're not just digitally enabled, we're digitally overwhelmed, and there's cybercrime, privacy concerns, intrusive marketing, information overload. I just want to play this little YouTube clip. Are we able to do that? Or because I don't know if I figured this out beforehand. I should have told you guys, to be fair, but if we can't play it, and I don't think we can, because we can.
Hey, just that, thanks.
You sure?
Yeah.
Username?
Oh, Nick M?
No.
NM 1983?
No.
Zandy Pops? Sorry. Zandy Pops?
No, okay. Don't worry, I'll help. What's your postcode?
Oh, it's GU749ZT.
Welcome back, Nick Forever.
Oh, okay.
Please listen carefully to this bread license agreement before continuing with your purchase of a loaf of bread. If you do not, blah, blah, blah. You also agree not to use any bread-based product for any purposes prohibited by United Kingdom law, including without limitation, design, development, manufacture of missiles, chemical, nuclear or biological weapons.
Tick.
I'm afraid you've timed out.
What? Sorry. Hello? Excuse me. Oh, yeah, hey.
Just one loaf, sir.
Yeah, we just...
What's your username?
It's Nick Forever, but number 4, not the...
Gotcha.
Yeah.
OK, I'm just going to check that you're a real person. Could you say that for me?
It's not even a word.
OK, how about this one?
You know what, forget it.
Or this one?
Hippo Potter Nice.
You're in.
Great, I'm in.
£8.85.
It's supposed to be 98 pence.
Plus express delivery.
What's that?
Oh, well, it's express delivery. It's fast. So there's, Standard.
Standard.
Standard delivery, that's £4.99.
Why?
Bread insurance. You didn't untick the don't decline bread insurance option.
You know what? I think I'll risk it.
It is quite close to the sell-by date.
Don't care.
98 pence it is. If you want to pop back in 5 business days, it'll be ready for your collection.
Well, I need it now, obviously.
Oh, OK, you want the take-home today price? Well, that's £3.27.
You know what? I'm going to go.
Come back soon.
I won't.
Dear customers, this call will be closing in 10 minutes. Please proceed to checkout. Please proceed to checkout. Thank you.
That's all. Appreciate you being able to play that at short notice. That's good. But that shows the pain and anguish you experience in an online environment, and why many people prefer the real world. And I think that's part of the beauty of art galleries and the physical spaces that we create that deliver on people's experience factors, because the Museums Association had me working with them a while back, and there was part of the view that we all have to develop iPhone apps and iPad apps that give you the virtual museum experience, and that's where we should invest. The other view was, don't bother with that, because there is a huge population of competitive players out there who are able to enter that space and develop that app and software as well. What we own is a piece of physical real estate in the middle of Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, that is incubated from digital disruption, because you can't build an app that does all of the same things that happen when you're there, and the social interaction experience has become an important part of that. And I turn this off. Sorry. No. Can you make that go page down? I've lost control. Pardon? Good. So it comes me to think about what is the end of customer experience? You know, the electricity company doesn't sell me electricity, they sell me light, warmth and heat. Qantas don't sell me a seat on the plane, they sell me the ability to come here and talk to an audience or read a book to my kids tonight. Those are the values that I'm getting at the end of the pipeline. You know, digital is only really a conduit to getting through to that. You probably walk past a lot of coffee shops to the one that you really want. It's all caffeine, but it's not really all that matters to you. There is a broader experiential good that you're wrapping around that caffeine, the ambience of the coffee shop. Is it fair trade? Did the barista smile and talk to you? What's the full set of goods that you're surrounding that? And the coffee shop that delivers gets more customers. So see some authors writing in the Harvard Business Review talk about the experience economy, and they give an analogy to a kid having a birthday party, right? And let's go back into the past, and they're a poor family living in rural Queensland somewhere, and they have this party, and mum and dad make a chocolate cake, and they trade milk, sugar, eggs, cocoa across the farm fence, and a lot of effort is put into making this cake, and it's a centerpiece of the party and all the kids love it, right? Now let's go forward a generation into the future with income growth, and the economy is diversified a bit. We now have parents working in town who are a bit wealthier and can afford to go to a cake shop and for the birthday, and they're able to get a digger cake, a tractor cake, a soccer field cake, or we had to Tinkerbell has been ruthlessly dropped in our family for Frozen, Anna and Elsa, and we've done Anna and Elsa cake. But all of a sudden, the expenditure is less about the physical ingredients where it used to be, and it is about an experiential good that the child is enjoying. Now let's go again another generation into the future with more income growth and more industry diversification. This time the parents jump online and order a party company to take care of the birthday party. And they have a clown, a magician, a jumping castle, decorations, and a cake is thrown in completely free of charge, and the physical ingredients become a very minor part of the expenditure, which is all around the experiential good. And this is this concept of the experience economy, which is about to be fueled by digital technology, right, which takes us away from a lot of the basics into this very conceptual world where the arts can play so well. Why do we switch from products to experiences too? It's diminishing marginal returns to utility, which is a dry concept, so I'm going to explain it here with drinking beer at the pub. So let's say we do go down for a beer at the pub after this session, and we start in a neutral state of utility, which the dismal science, that's happiness, and we go from beer 1 to 2, and we get a bit of a jump in utility. 2 to 3, a continued jump in utility. 3 to 4, it's levelling off, then it starts to come back down, and by around about 11 o'clock to midnight, we get our second wind and it goes back up again. Then it goes down and down and down until that's where you buy a kebab and the night is well and truly over, okay? Now, it's not a straight line. You've experienced, you've consumed that good, you switch. What we know in economics is we switch our discretionary expenditure into something else, an experiential good. Economies, the data from the OECD shows dematerialization happens over time. The amount of material consumed for $1 of GDP declines because people start to go to the cinema, they start to have holidays, they go to art galleries, they do experiential things. And that, as we see 1 billion people across Asia cross an income threshold from being poor to middle income class and move up through Maslow's hierarchy, they're moving into the space of experiences. Lastly, I just want to drum home this concept of the innovation imperative, because this is what sits behind negating a lot of the risks and capturing a lot of the opportunities here. Now is the time to rattle the cage, experiment with new business models, invest in ideas and rethink organisational structures. We're in a period of productivity decline in the Australian economy, and arts certainly plays an important role in reversing this. Productivity is a ratio of what goes into the economy and what comes out the other end, and in the long term, Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winner, tells us this is everything for wealth creation. Now, we've hit this peak in about 2005 and it's declining. Where we're really up to is the thing that turns it around is ideas and innovation. That's the fuel source for a modern economy. Tyler Cowen's written a book on this. He's a US academic in economics from Chicago, and he's written his book, which examines similar trend in the United States, is called The Great Stagnation, about this leveling off of productivity in OECD countries. And the byline is how America ate all of the low-hanging fruit of recent history, got sick, but will eventually get better again. And if it's at all on the front cover. But that's the concept, is that we've taken a lot of easy gains in the last century. The next one comes from deeper, bolder ideas. And it's not all science and tech, it's deeper, bolder ideas in the arts sector as well. I'm going a little bit over time, I think, so I'm going to move towards a wrap-up here. Innovation is at the core. It's something that we often struggle to do. A lot of the organisational structures that we work inside are not good for innovation. They tend to stifle it and close it off. Clayton Christensen showed up at Harvard Business School 20 years ago with the basic question about why some companies fail and others do very well, and he puts it down to innovation. But he also points out in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma, that the organisation, the large organisation typically is genetically engineered to kill off the innovation that's going to save it, because initially that idea doesn't fit. It doesn't have a revenue stream. It's illogical, so extinguish it, and management are doing a great job for 9 out of every 10. But unfortunately, that 10th one could be what would have saved Eastman Kodak from bankruptcy. It was a radical shift and a different way of doing things, which originally would have looked bad, but could have evolved into something. So we need to move more into a world that is somehow accommodating these new ideas and giving them space to grow. And I think, to end, watch a TEDx talk called The Power of Daydreaming. They open up with a story from a British author who wasn't an author to begin with. She was an analyst working for Amnesty International, and her train broke down on the way from Manchester to London. And instead of busily working on her notes, she recalls in her memoirs gazing out the window to think about stuff with no clear purpose. And that's where the idea of a magician came into her head, and a train, which would be eventually called Hogwarts Express. And that led to her writing. She started writing at Clapham Junction, and 5 years later, the first version of Harry Potter came out, which we all know the story from there. It became a huge bestseller. But the power of daydreaming in this busy, frantic world is what is starting, I think, to get valuable, as the routine, the repetitive, and the stuff that's obvious and in front of us isn't delivering the big gains that we need to have daydreamers who think. And that's kind of the purpose of my team a bit. We're a growing team doing strategic foresight in Data61, which is part of CSIRO in the digital area. And our aim is to really understand these trends of the future. We're doing it here in Brizzy. Thank you very much for your time.
I told you it was going to be a fantastic presentation, and a bit overwhelming in a way. There's so much to take in. Look, I ask questions for a living. I could sit here for the next half an hour and talk to Stefan, but really the point is getting all of you involved in this, thinking about some of the principles and ideas and projections that Stefan's put out there, and thinking about how that may affect what you're doing now and where your work will take you. So we want to get some questions, comments from the audience, as many as we can. If there's anyone who wants to get the ball rolling, put your hand up. If you don't, or if you want a couple of minutes to think about it, I could get things going.
There's one there.
There is one, great. I'd prefer to hear from you. I get sick of the sound of my own voice, actually. So let's get a microphone to the woman in the middle there.
Is this on? Great. So I'm very interested in the idea of the Internet of Things, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm wondering if you could speak directly about the impact that that is going to have specifically on the arts. Of course, the megatrends are all going to have an impact, but how is the Internet of Things going to affect the arts today?
Good question. Yeah, look, I think it's going to be huge and pervasive in what it does across the whole economy. What does it mean for the arts? It means everything is connected to everything else. Sensory systems that are giving us information all the time. So what if the Queensland Art Gallery plugged itself into all of the city's information systems that somehow gave us a concept of what was happening right now at this very second, that gave us some thoughts and impressions? What if it creates new avenues for artistic expression, real-time sensory data that is happening before our eyes? So it's not just an image, it's an image that means something in the context of a city. So I think this sensory network and the ubiquity of data that's happening out there has got to create new ways of doing art. Does it drive different demand and interest in art? Quite possibly, I'm not sure how. But that'd be my best thought. Do you have ideas on what the Internet of Things does for art?
Well, I mean, my one thought is just that it connects artists with the consumers. So how you had mentioned that economy is moving towards a more peer-to-peer experience. Myself, I'm a singer, so I don't need to go through a record label to share my music. I can just put a song on YouTube.
Yep.
And I mean, in a perfect world, it would go viral, and I can reach millions of people just from me and not needing to go through other people. So I think that's sort of the Internet of Things, and you can see it right from your phone or wherever you are.
Yep.
I think, Stefan, too, part of it is imagining a different future. I mean, you talk about the Kodak story, and I think it's one of the great cautionary tales of the digital age. This company that in 1996 made $16 billion a year, that had 90% of the film market and 85% of the camera market. It was a monolithic corporation that by 2012 had gone broke simply because they couldn't imagine a world where people didn't want their photographs on paper. Now, these were smart guys that had made a lot of money in a big corporation, and they couldn't make what we now think is a really simple leap. So how does the work that you do help us to make those leaps and think about what's possible?
You see, I think in Kodak and a lot of places, individuals saw it coming, but there's this organisational momentum and resistance to innovation early on that kills it before it can happen and do anything. So the statistics, you've great memory to remember those statistics out of the book, but I use also the analogy of the kangaroo being caught in the headlights here instead of, in that it sees the change coming and it just stands dazzled and glares at it until wham, it gets a ton of Toyota in its face.
I'm sure you know the story about the engineer who in 1975, the Kodak engineer invented the world's first digital camera.
That's right.
And took it to their bosses, and they basically said, that's never going to take off. Anyway, sorry, let's keep the ball rolling.
That's where the ability to respond to this stuff requires someone to have an idea and then an ability to develop and grow it.
Yep.
I wonder if you could give us a sense, or a forecast, if you like, on legislative change and the rate that's going to be required to recognise shifts in copyright, particularly if one of the purposes of this is reboosting or repurposing or riffing on. Appropriation is a major problem legally in the United States, even still, for artists quoting other people's work. What rate of change is required in the law for this to keep up?
In general, law and regulation is not keeping pace with the world of technology. We're seeing a lot of change. I think we're about to see blockchain released on the Australian economy and the US economy. The algorithms that sat behind Bitcoin might have crashed and burned, but the really intelligent algorithms which allowed permissionless access and management of the transaction, you know, it sounds pretty boring, but I think it's going to be quite fundamentally changing what it does. It also opens up an avenue via which illegal contracting can occur in radical ways that we haven't seen before. By and large, though, law and government regulators are not keeping pace. They're not keeping pace with the peer-to-peer economy, which is about to deliver huge changes in workplace relations. Workplace law isn't keeping up with it. You know, a lot of people who work on freelancer.com, are they protected in the same way? Mostly, the legal system doesn't know what to do with that yet. But I think a smart legal system turns to technologies like blockchain and a lot of others to change fundamentally what it's doing so it can keep pace, and there's innovation that has to happen inside that space too.
Great, fantastic.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions coming in from online. The first one is, can you see the relevance of the megatrends on Queensland arts as opposed to New South Wales arts? So I think they're trying to say what opportunities or impacts are happening in Queensland that may be different to...
Are they in New South Wales, the ones who are probably now? Look, I don't think things that change that much across the border. I think the same forces are at play by and large in both states. Yeah, that's my feeling, in that we are, you know, that the boundaries we create on maps don't actually make that much difference, especially in this interconnected world of digital.
Another one?
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a few actually. So what can the Internet of Things do specifically in the museum sector, perhaps, that you've seen, or what great ideas do you have?
So another sort of concept around Internet of Things. I think it is the connectivity to live sensory systems that tell us about the environment, that tell us about how a city is functioning. But with everything plugged into everything, a layer of information sits on top of that that is going to be fascinating to people and inform them as well.
Thank you. And so considering the Kodak story that you mentioned earlier, what are some large organisations that are good examples of ones that allow innovation room to breathe?
I think the digital natives that of Google, of Facebook, the new digital native company that has sprung up so quickly is the CEO of Cyro and the chief of my division, Larry Marshall and Adrian Turner, are both Australians who've been in Silicon Valley for the last 15 years, and they're bringing a whole new culture and way of thinking. You know, this idea of lean innovation and innovation cycles where you have a small team look at an issue, you try it, you design a product, you put it out in the marketplace, it fails, but you learn, and then you cycle again, and you go through the cycle, and you cycle again and cycle again. And the teams are kept small, the costs you aim to keep small, but you keep on repeating the process, and you don't mind failing quite a few times and looking a bit ridiculous until the idea forms, and then it can scale up very quickly. And that's what sits behind a lot of these companies that have gone from zero to market capitalizations of over 120 billion US, let's say, in only a 5 to 10 year period. Historically, that never happened. That was a 50 year to 100 year effort to reach that level of market capitalization. But we're seeing digital has the capability to rapidly scale up the idea. So get the idea out, test it. When the person fails the first time, encourage them to give it another shot. Let them fail a couple of times, and make sure the learning stays inside the team each time.
Just
Hi.
Thanks so much for drawing attention to the failure of efficiency to be the productivity leverage we need, and pointing towards, you know, the deeper, bolder ideas you expect. What I'm interested in, not so much is what's been happening and where it might go, but because you're in strategic foresight, what else? What's the big idea that's coming out of your team that we could take on? Not the black swan, but what's else that we can, by our actions, make happen, not just follow the trend?
What else from our actions can we really make happen? What do we mean, like in terms of?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
That's right.
I see following trends as research and development rather than risk and development.
Right.
And a lot to do with the arts is more about risk taking and
Right.
leading with content, not
Right, gotcha.
leveraging vehicles like
Well, I
the
think,
internet.
got you. I think that a lot of what we're seeing, we are seeing a slowdown and stagnation of OECD economies as productivity is leveling. What we absolutely require across all sectors of industry, arts and others, is people who are willing to rattle the cage and experiment with new ideas, because that is what is the fuel source for increased economic growth. And in Australia, we also need to invent whole new industries, right? Mining has run its course, and we know the mining boom is over. Now, we should have been thinking about something to do next 10 years ago. We're now realising that and thinking really hard, but we need some creative people to build these new industries, and it absolutely can happen in arts, that new industry can be built. I've got a lot of ideas on this, but I think we've basically moved beyond a certain phase of wealth creation in Australia, which has been good. We need to jump boldly into the next one, but it's going to require this innovative spirit. Yeah.
Just based on that innovative spirit, do you think there's a possibility where organisations will actually turn to the public for community engagement to find those innovative thinking daydreamers? Based on the one example, I'm sure we've all had conversations around a bar or at a dinner table where people have had amazing ideas, but what platform can you use if you're a really good thinking daydreamer to start turning the world around?
That's a great thought, and I think let's look necessarily at a government to be the ones who, they're not the most innovative. Don't look to necessarily the big multinationals or existing corporations. The great idea that you have all of a sudden can scale up very rapidly. You can test it at low cost, you can design software, you can build a website, you can build a community and a network around it way more effectively today than could ever have been done before. And we need people who have that idea to hold on to it long enough to give it a go and test it. And they build their next Atlassian. Pardon? The Google search bar.
It happens everywhere.
Sorry.
In my business, it's happening in podcasting, for example. Someone in their backyard decides they've got an idea, and before the platform of podcasts existed, they could record a cassette and hand it around to their friends. But now they can put it online, and some of these have become phenomenally successful, from no listeners to being massively influential on organisations like the ABC. The platforms exist, they're everywhere.
And I think there is a recognition of that. A lot of companies are setting up innovation hubs. Cisco, Cyro's doing this sort of thing as well. It's where we try and bring people in from outside to grow and develop that idea, because often that's, it's almost impossible to tell at the beginning which idea is going to work. But let's not always look to the sort of historic and traditional organisations to come up with this innovation. It doesn't necessarily come from that direction.
Hello. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm over here.
Gotcha.
I had a question about education and the arts, and you hear a lot of calls about coding to be mandatory in schools now.
Yeah.
And wanted to just ask, with the changes in computing, is that the new literacy for school kids, or is that moment past?
Look, I think coding is great that we're doing it, and it's a vital skill set in that we used to have literacy, numeracy to get a job. We now need digital literacy, and the ability to send sequenced instructions to a machine to get that machine to do what you want makes you so much more powerful and useful, even as an artist as well. Artists will have to learn to computer code to be able to create their artworks and make them effective, or a lot of artists will. And we need to start doing it from an early age. My daughter's school have this fantastic B computer that teaches kids at a very early age in prep. That's 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds how to program, in that you have this 5x5 grid on the floor, and you have a B, and you go forward, like you can program the B to move around. They put obstacles in the way, so that you've got to get the B from here to here, and you go forward, 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 left, right, forward, and it gets it to the other side. Now, the kids are starting to learn to code. They're starting to learn to do that. The machine is going to get so much more powerful and so much more capable that understanding how to make it do what you want makes you a whole lot more productive. Andrew McAfee, Eric Brynjolfsson, in their book, The Second Machine Age, which compares the information revolution to the industrial revolution, say learn to race with the machine, not against it, because if you're trying to race against it, you lose, but plug yourself into it, you do very well. But there are some provisos here in that in our report on the future of work, and we looked at the issues of the STEM crisis, it becomes table stakes to get a job, but it's not enough. You need IQ to match the EQ. You need emotional intelligence, social interaction, handling complexity and fuzziness. These are the things that differentiate you in a highly competitive labour market. So I think it was a Fin Review that ran with an article of a young female graduate from QUT who did mathematics, engineering and fine arts and was snapped up by IBM for a really plum job. That's the sort of combination that can be really powerful, I think, because it brings these different elements together. But yeah, it's a high-tech world doesn't, it's increased the table stakes for us to learn to be able to use this technology, but by far and away not enough. And that's the sort of, the graphs I showed you of field photographers versus lab people. That's the sort of shift that happens in lots of other professions.
We're going to have to wrap it, Stefan.
Are we?
Unfortunately, I thought this would happen.
One more, because she's...
Okay, one more.
Sorry, my name's Imogene. My question actually rolls really nicely from what you were saying from Norm's question as well. I was wondering about the creative... so you've scratched the surface on the creative skills and needs and the need for an innovative spirit. And I was wondering what you would recommend we do now for children and young people for them to, work effectively in the future that you have described.
Yeah, and it's a very good question, and I don't know all the answers, but I think the school education needs to take that into account. I think we maybe need to rethink what failure looks like and allow it to happen, so long as that it's matched up with learning and improvement. But don't bring up kids who are too scared to fail. Create an environment where they can, but then they can keep going. I think the arts has a huge role to play in building all of the additional stuff that technology, that automation, that global sort of labour markets can't do. The highly creative bits is, I suspect, the space where things get important. So I don't really, you hit the nail on the head with a big ticket item for the future of Queensland and ensuring our kids get jobs, and we should keep thinking about how we actually deliver on putting all that creativity into kids.
Okay, we are just going to finish off with
one more just from online. Thank you, Stefan.
Sorry,
so
man.
there was just a question about how can artists or arts workers grapple with the overwhelm of information, interconnection and change happening, and will innovation later then become too overwhelming?
It does look overwhelming, but this world of challenge in front of us that looks so hard is just so laden with opportunity as well, so that it will create those opportunities that inside all of this complexity of and massive explosion of data and computers around us, inside there is this huge opportunity. So maybe that's a good point to...
Yeah. I love your point about daydreaming though. Yeah. And it made me think of the dreamers who kept buying vinyl records during the digital era. And the strangest thing of all happened when the MP3 and the iPod killed off almost entirely the recording industry and CD sales fell. And all of a sudden you have this bizarro world now where the fastest growing sector of sales of recorded music is vinyl turntables, which I think dovetails into your thing about the experiential economy as well. Yeah. And also it's worth remembering that this plethora of digital devices did not kill off the Swiss watch. They moved upmarket, and they're now highly coveted items. So there's lots of sort of inconsistencies, and and I always come back to this question of it's really the decision about, with sort of legacy industries, what is it that we need to keep from the past and what is it we need to throw away as we move to the future. And your core business is not always what you think it is. And these are the sort of challenges that we really all have to face, that I face every day in my business and that Stefan has pointed out. Look, thanks for coming along tonight. I know that there's so much to talk about and we really hope that You can keep talking about it. There are some drinks being served in the foyer afterwards if you do want to stick around and continue the conversation. I found this fascinating conversation. Arts Queensland will post a recording of this presentation on their website at arts.qld.gov.au should you wish to refer back to it and share some insights with your networks and with your friends. We'll also send a quick survey to you via email for feedback on tonight's event and what additional resources you might find useful through the Arts Acumen initiative. So do stay on, continue the conversation, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks.